Hey everyone, welcome back to another Coffee with Kittl episode. Today I'm super excited because we're talking about flash sheets, logo flash sheets, lockups, different things like that, and I just absolutely love it. And I have Eric Hatheway with us, which is one of our ambassadors, has been with us since like probably the very beginning, if not before. And he is an amazing, super talented designer. I'm going to show his page here in a second, and he's going to talk to us about flash sheets. I have some questions lined up so that you all know what kind of goes into a flash sheet. Why is it important for branding? When should you give it to a client? Things like that. And he seems to be the master at flash sheets. I have no idea how you pump these out so fast, but I could not think of a better person to talk about flash sheets than Eric. So
Thank you.
if you wouldn't mind just a couple sentences about who you are and your background, and then we'll just jump into the discussion.
Okay. Well, went to college, got a marketing degree, went to work for an oil company because we have a lot of oil companies where I live. And 3 years later, got laid off. And there I was on January 2nd, standing on the corner in a snowstorm with a box of my stuff. So I eventually found another job and I worked 5 more years and saved up my money and went back to school to get an art degree so I could be a graphic designer. I was in the last class there to be trained on the drawing board.
Oh, wow.
Paste ups and stat cameras, Ruby Lith, all that. Rub on type, if you remember that. So I graduated from there and attempted to find a job, and computers were out. I purchased a Macintosh Quadra 950 through the mail because there were no Apple stores back then, and it was the size of a suitcase.
Yeah, they were big.
And I bought Adobe Illustrator version 1 and started with Photoshop version 2 and bought Quark Express and rented an office and started my own business. Specialized in small to medium-sized businesses, corporate identity and image, a lot of logos. And then in 2015, I had some health problems that required 9 surgeries over 18 months, and had to give up the business and had a lot of time on my hands. So I started noticing all this vintage. None of my projects ever had a call for that. If you are interested in vintage products, you're going to find heritage type.
Yes, you will.
Yes, you will. So I started purchasing the vintage products through Heritage and using them, and I had success. And then I joined the Facebook group and came across you, and you invited me to be an ambassador, and here we are.
And the rest is history. There we are.
History in the making, right?
Yeah, history in the making. Yeah, we're not done yet. There's lots of things coming for Kittl. I've got Eric's profile pulled up here, which you guys can check out, linked in the description to check out all of his amazing work. There's so much here, and you can already see there's a couple of flash sheet, logo flash sheets for different, brands for different use cases. I love this one. This is I think one of my favorites you've done, just because I'm such a fan of vertical type, because the use case is not so widely structured or needed unless it's on a building or the up and down the back of a shirt or something. So the way that you've done, for example, cold beer on the left and right here is really, really nice. So definitely check out his profile. Please follow Eric on Kittl. And you'll be able to see when he uploads new templates, which is amazing. So to kind of get started, so you've already sent me some flash sheets, and people are going to get some sneak peeks here because you haven't published some of the logo ones or these that you've shared with me. I want to talk about why flash sheets are important. I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while. Again, reached out to you and said this would be, I think, a better conversational piece as to why flash sheets are important. So Eric's sent me some illustration heavy flash sheets, as well as some branding logo lockup flash sheets that we're going to get into, but I don't want to give all the juice away yet. I want to keep some secrets for later. What are the main components of a flash sheet, and why do you think it's important?
You need to understand why flash sheets came about. I think they were around the time they really took off when the tattoo gun came on the scene.
Yes.
And so tattoo artists began making flash sheets and selling them to other tattoo artists.
Right.
So you could make a case that that was the first clip art.
Yeah. And has led to actually what I believe is a main staple in branding. Really, you're going to have maybe not
Right.
necessarily a flash sheet in its own right, like iterations of like you would use the same logo. Whereas in this example that you've provided here, we have a lot of different illustrations that are obviously in the same style, in this traditional tattoo style, that would be used to help the artist and or the client, right, visually see from a selection, what can
Right.
inspire them to get this work done. And we've translated this into modern day branding, where we can show you a logo in like 5 or 6 variants of itself to help the client realize that there are several situations that you could see this logo.
Right. And I think the key word is style. The flash sheets were designed to show the same style on a sheet.
Right. Yes.
And so it's important that these logos all look cohesive and they belong together,
right,
which on down the road is important to branding.
As we move so there are several iterations, several versions of flash sheet. What you would see right here is what we would probably consider the most traditional version of what an actual flash sheet would be, which is illustration, something that helps the artist help the client or the designer, kind of like almost like a mood board of sorts. But as we move into how this is translated into logo design. So let's take this one, for example, here, this beautiful one that you've done with, microphone and different icons like a video camera and satellite and different things like that for this communications group. Let's just take this one, for example. What are the situations that you're thinking about? Because someone first starting out might be like, a flash sheet, okay, and then they look on Pinterest or they look on whatever and they see a flash sheet and they just kind of mimic, but don't really know what the purposes or the situations for these variants are. So what are the situations that you're thinking about, and maybe you can walk us through in this sheet here that you were thinking about putting all of these together?
They all come from one. I start from one, and
right.
I set up a scenario in my head, like this business here, using 2 of my favorite words. It's a communications group. So I knew, since it's a group, that I'm going to have sub-logos. There were the various divisions of the business and so forth. And so you can see how we have a satellite dish and a microphone and anything that a communications group might do, a camera, they might produce commercials, whatever. And I just play off that theme. We'll see later with the car parts thing. I set up another scenario that I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah. And it's what's interesting and important is that this isn't, you mentioned when we looked at the traditional tattoo one, it's the same style. So in instances, we may need just for a letterhead, or we may just need for like a pocket t-shirt or something. So we've got our main type here. And then over here in this B and H, we have, it's the same typeface, so we don't want to go off the rails and start doing something different just because we're making sub logos, right? So we need to make sure we're using what we would call the same design language.
Right, the same language. These logos should sort of breed each other.
Yes.
After a while, you get the feeling that it's designing itself. I mean, if it works well for you, not all my things work out real well, and that's in my scrap bin. But
yeah,
but I think this is a really nice typeface. I love the rhythm on it. And when I make my templates, I like to use really long words like hullabaloo. Yeah, because I know if I can fit in hullabaloo, you can fit in your word too.
That is a great point. Yes, it is rare that you're going to have such an exacerbated word length.
Like if the name of this business was Ace, well, those spaces are going to shrink up pretty good.
Right. Yeah.
And say if somebody put in a longer word, it might throw the whole design off. So I kind of take that into consideration. This group, these corporations now do everything, signs, microphone flags, you name it. It's everywhere. I could see him on some of this stuff on letterhead.
Yeah, and you have several, several iterations of the background shape, right? So,
Right.
for example, in this scenario, in let's just say whatever fantasy client, maybe not all four of these actually end up being used or make the cut or whatever. Maybe they really like this one in the simple oval, or maybe they really dig just the plain rectangle, man. Sometimes just a rectangle is all you need.
Right.
Like,
and as a brand, they could safely use those,
right,
and not damage the brand as a whole.
Yeah, so we're again using not only design language that is similar, but we're not introducing this component that's of a different, category or style or whatever. Or we're not introducing, we do have an organic shape with the oval, but for lack of a better term, a lot of these use geometric shapes. We're not introducing like a blob or something behind type, right? We're using the same shape structure for all of.
Always start in black and white.
Yes.
Always. Because I was taught if a logo cannot function in black and white, it's no good.
I guess another kind of way to think about it would be grayscale. It'll show you weird inconsistencies or weird shapes that are happening. And then you can start adding color onto it. Another way to think about it is like make it really small.
And I promise you that client is gonna want to put his logo in a penny saver in black and white. I promise you.
In black and white, yeah. Yeah, and you're always gonna need it. I don't think I've ever had any logo branding job for an agency or private that I've never provided it in black and white. Like, you always need it. You will always need to make sure that it works that way first, and then add your color. And a color is like a whole nother thing we could go into for a whole nother hour. So let's go on to what is maybe like chaos controlled, I guess. And this is amazing. And I think you said there was a reference right here. So beautiful. Okay, so walk me through. I obviously have a couple more questions, but we've gone from like, so everybody's kind of understanding, like we're going from like kind of history. So we've got like the kind of history in the making, moving forward. We've got traditional tattoo flash sheet in the realist sense of the word. Then we've got like, here's a great example. Also, you could go to his page and find some other really great flash sheets. Like this one, for example, is also really nice.
I like that one.
Yeah. And then now we've got one that I think might be, first of all, we could talk about halftones forever because I see you found the halftones. But walk us through how you've taken an old reference, which is already very flash sheet-ish, if you were to say it. It's not what it is. It's more of an advertisement or a slider or a filler in the newspaper. And you've actually made a branded flash sheet from this with not only auto parts and type and things like that, but even phrases and how they could use, either on headers or whatever.
Right.
So walk us through that process.
Well, the reference on the left is a page from an old J.C. Whitney auto parts catalog. And those things were jam-packed. You can see there is no wasted space there. None. Tiny type. And so I decided, well, I'll just jam pack this flash sheet. I'll just emulate that. And so I settled on the word boss because of the old boss Mustang, I guess.
Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So it's a common word that car guys know. Yeah. And the little scenario I created here was the owner. You notice there's an upside down type.
Yes, I did notice that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had that question.
My fictional owner is a little OCD, and he doesn't like his boxes to be stocked on the shelves upside down.
Okay, that's clever.
So we have upside down type, so they always read correctly on the shelf.
That is actually awesome. Very clever. I did not think that. I thought you were doing it as a design choice. I was not thinking that critically, but that's actually a great use case for how it's maybe not necessary. It doesn't have to necessarily be the main logo, albeit it is, but it's something that you could do. And with the type choice that you've done here, it works that way, right? You know, again, this one has a different design language than the previous flash sheet did.
Well, like the piston, the mag wheel, and the spark plug, and maybe even the muffler. Even the graphics read correctly upside down.
I see. Yeah. There's no weird translation. I mean, obviously we still have, you know, we have a whole car lockup here, Big Boss high performance auto. So you have everything you need right here in this iteration that would be used in situations that aren't upside down, right? An employee's shirt or jacket or patch. That I could see this is a design that would be done on patches. Or someone's in an auto garage or something.
Sponsor a race car.
Sponsor. Oh, yes, exactly. And so I think that's like a good kind of beefy point is don't necessarily go look up stuff like your references here on the left. So I'm not trying to tell people not to go look at Pinterest and go look at, you know, Behance and go look at whatever for lockups and flash sheet. You type in flash sheet, you're going to get it. But don't necessarily copy those structures for the sake of copying them to make a flash sheet, because I mean, your flash sheet doesn't actually look like that newspaper. It just looks like it's heavily influenced by it. And you've thought of these instances where, okay, we've got a branding gig for an auto parts place. What comes with auto parts stuff? Okay, well, the technicians probably have patches on their shirt. There's a big sign out front on the top. They have parts that they sell. So we have this upside down type, so the box flip. You know what I mean? So there's these situations that you're thinking about, as you mentioned in this fictional owner, that you've already pre-thought about. And that even probably becomes easier for you if you're actually doing a branding job, because you're not sitting there at home making up fictional options. The client's actually telling you, hey, here's a branding. I know I need a logo design, need branding done. Here are the 8 different ways that like our logo is used. I'm not saying you have to have 8 lockups, but you know, that's kind of the idea.
There was no need to read that reference. I just needed to see what it appeared like. And I try not to look too hard at my examples in my research, because I'm not out to copy them.
Right.
I just want to be influenced by it.
Again, if you type in barbershop flash sheet or auto flash sheet or whatever on any website like Pinterest, you're going to get it. And it's going to be very easy to end up copying it. Of course, if we're publishing a template on Kittl, it's there for you to use. So I'm not saying that you can't use it. You just go in there and you make it so that it is how you need it to be. Maybe there is actually a client in the world that needs auto parts branding job like this, and they can go in and put their name in there. They're good to go. But when you're creating a flash sheet is kind of what we're talking about, and you're wanting to start from scratch and use these inspirational pieces, you're not just going line by line, you know, text by text and image by image. You're just saying like, okay, this layout is very heavy, making use of, I would say on this one, you're making use of every single piece of the board almost. Like negative space does not exist here. I'm just kidding. It does.
And I should say that the name of this started out as Boss. And then I created that scenario in my head, or that requirement by the fictional owner. And so it became Boss.
No. And that's like, you know, and again, there are iterations of that could be actually happen. You know what I mean? And it's not that it doesn't have to happen that way. So let's move to a more, what I would say, traditional modern style. So again, if we're kind of going back through our history, we've got like a reference from where flash sheets came from. Then we've got a nice kind of oldies style flash sheet. Then we've got a nice retro auto parts, very jam-packed flash sheet. And now we're starting to get a little bit cleaner, a little bit simplistic, a little bit more vector illustration with some funky type. So in this example where we have the Sunken Sailor tattoo parlor, you know, what were you thinking had to happen in this fictional client that you've set up that had a tattoo parlor? Why did you choose to do the lockups in this way?
The anchor.
Mm.
Those crossed anchors there have a nice space in the center that exactly fits that skull.
That is true.
And it went from there. And I did not know what to call it. Drunken sailor, that's no good. Sound alike, sunken.
Yeah,
Anchors.
sound alikes are always a clever move, especially for templates, right? It's always like
right, and I love to play on words.
Yeah, and there's different use cases in this. So what's interesting to think about looking at a reference that was our previous reference, where I would say arguably there's probably a lot more use cases for the different lockups of the boss than there are here, because in a tattoo shop we have different clientele, and your client has a different way of using these logos. So you're going to have something on the glass that's outside the shop. You're going to have t-shirts, and you're going to have your iconography, which is placed here so that you can see it equally for various purposes, maybe for social media. So again, we're moving kind of more into the modern side of things. And then on this bottom, I love the bottom part of this because you've got several similar lockups that fit the same square space. So I'm thinking things like business cards, stickers, stuff that the person coming in to get a tattoo. These are things you would send home with it's perfect size for a magnet. So all of these use cases are different than the previous mock-up or different lockup that you showed us in the previous boss one. But you can see how it's a similar situation. We've just changed the situation, I guess. Like the medium, excuse me, is what I was trying to say. That we changed the medium for where they're needed.
And I, of course, use the same skull because I want to stick to the same style. Really, the trident there is just a divider. I used to use it for a divider.
Yeah, filling a little bit of space in our grid. Yeah.
Designers hate a vacuum.
Yeah, but yeah, I just looking at it from a distance, I wasn't even thinking that you were using the same skull until I like zoomed in just a little bit here, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is the same skull. But you've put it with different illustrations. That's really a neat way to do that, so that the whole language is cohesive. Because I mean, you could have 6 different skulls, but then like which one goes in the main logo, which one goes on your shirt, which one goes on the outside of the tattoo shop,
I used all the anchors I could find.
Yeah, I see.
Not all of them. You need to make sure your illustrations are consistent in the way they look.
Yeah, absolutely, and that they translate well, right, on top of different things, and simple iterations where we need simple flat design, and then there are situations where we would need more detailed design. This detailed design is not going to be used in simple, super small places because it's going to get lost, right? But something like just the skull by itself, or just the skull with the two anchors, can be used in small situations. And that's another point we haven't even talked about yet, is having these instances of scalability in mind. And I mean, we've kind of talked about it in terms of like, what medium does it need to be used? Is it a patch? Is it a business card? Is it a letterhead? Is it a sign outside the shop? But scalability is embedded in that, right? So you need to think about, you're going through this whole lockup, you're making this whole flash sheet, and you've made something that's beautiful, and then you go, this type has all of this crazy vintage etching in it, but what am I going to do when the client asks for a 1x1 pin or something? You know what I mean? I'm not saying the type has to be the pin, but you're thinking about this scalability as well as the medium, right? So it's very important in this kind of, it's actually in design in general. It wouldn't have to necessarily be in a flash sheet. But let's move to the last one, because this one we've got a little bit more space. What's different about this one is what would maybe be more, I don't want to say like more commonly used, because it's the same type, right? With the same structure, with the same rise effect in a bunch of different cases, basically a bunch of different instances. However, the type is actually the same. And in fact, a buddy of mine which sent me a lockup, a flash sheet that he was sending to a client just to look for feedback. And the way his was structured is very similar to here. It's the same type, same logo in a variety of what I guess would be frames, so that the client can see iterations and be like, it's this one. On the van, it's this one. You know what I mean? So
and again, they could safely use any one of these.
Yes. Yeah. You don't want to provide something that's like we could probably talk all day about what the purpose of a flash sheet is, but it's not. So in my opinion, maybe you can tell me if you think that it's different. My opinion of a flash sheet is not necessarily to provide you with like 7 logo options. It's for you to see how the logo that I've already crafted could be used in 7 iterations, but it's the same logo. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same logo.
Yeah.
And I was last night. I was trying to think if I had 7 different logos there, is that a contact sheet or a proof sheet?
Yeah.
But in these cases, it's important that they be like a tattoo flash sheet of the same style,
cohesive. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. We would say it's like at this point we're getting into brand identity, and I think that. I mean, I believe there are 2 types of flash sheets, because I've done projects for both, where a client would say, I want a flash sheet of different like options in this style. And so what the client meant there, and I guess this would be important maybe for someone that may get a message like this one day, what they meant was they sent a mood board and basically said, here's the style, which was like very hand-drawn, naive, squiggly style drawing type, whatever. They didn't want me to make what you see here, which is the same type in 8 different instances. They wanted a flash sheet of options of logos in that style that could work. Okay, and that's a lot more work. And 2, you need to set expectations, because you're like, well, I'm not gonna like design 8 logos in the same style, right? So a flash sheet would act more of like a design language that utilizes the same makeup of the logo that they've entrusted you to make. So, I mean, what would you say? Like,
well, if I made 5 different logo ideas that I wanted to submit to a client, I would show them separately, for one thing.
Exactly.
One per page, because I want them to consider that on that page only. What I'm planning on doing is providing the client with a flash sheet like this, and knowing that it's instantly going to confuse them, because they have to make a choice, and just say they're all yours.
Yeah. Yes.
There is no choice here. Just
we're in the end game, basically. This is not and that was going to be my next question, is like, when do you send a client a flash sheet? And I think we've just answered that it's up to you, and it depends. And I mean, does it fit the brief, or do they literally want, like you said, do they want 5 logo options, which should be more expensive, by the way, that you would show on individual pages, right? Or do you want to, because yeah, so what you said about confusing it made me think of why I didn't like the kind of design brief I got a while ago, which was, here's the style, let's see a flashy, and they used that term. I don't think that's what they should have said, but they were saying, make me a flash sheet of like logo options in this style. Well, I can't give them this and then be like, they're all yours. I have to give them the flash sheet and say choose, but they're looking at all of them at the same time and being influenced by all of them at the same time, and to me that's too confusing. Whereas with this flash sheet as example we have here, it's the same logo, right? I think it's there's a lot of talk now about adding value, the value proposition. I think that when you hand that over to a client and say there is no choice here, they're all yours if you want them, it's all your brand, that it adds a lot of value to the project that otherwise wouldn't be there. If I presented 5 logos and they whittled it down to 2, well, that would cause me to make 10 more logos. Because they haven't chose the one, You know,
Right.
they chose.
And
We
they would
like,
want
yeah,
to keep seeing variations off of, and then we're in that vicious cycle
yeah,
of
no,
changes.
yeah, and that's another thing that I was going to mention is flash, like doing a flash sheet like this, and you can call it whatever you want. You can call it logo lockup sheet or whatever,
Or a hot sheet
hot sheet or whatever. Like, I believe that it will save you time, and not only time, but just like it's going to cover all your bases a lot faster. So like in what you're saying, you give them this and you go like, well, they're all yours. Well, like if you're designing with this use case in mind, you don't need to get the email back that says, oh, by the way, can you do this in business cards? You've done the lockup that works in the business card. Oh, by the way, like we're actually growing a lot faster now. Could you make like 5 letterheads or letterhead for 500 brochures? You've done it. You know what I mean? It's like you're kind of covering, you're working smarter, like working ahead of time in this flashy.
Also, I'm kind of trying to keep my client from using the logo as they see fit. I mean, at one of our shopping centers here, there was a high-class tennis shop, and all about Wimbledon. And so we did everything. The colors, there were awnings outside. The colors are maroon and green or something like that. She spent a lot of money on it. I visited her one day, probably to drop off a bill. She had gone to a copy shop and she was having a sale. She used Day-Glo paper and plastered it up in the windows and stuff, and just completely left what we had decided on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if a style guide has ever been fully followed.
That should be a shirt for designers. There's some sort of quote there we can make.
But they will tamper with your logo.
Oh yeah,
eventually. And I'm trying to hedge against that a little bit here. And I think if they got 5 things to choose from that are actually the same logo,
and they want to accidentally use 3 of them at different times, then that's fine. That's fine. Something's going to happen that wasn't accounted for in the previous briefing, like a sale or a flyer or a whatever. And when you're thinking ahead of time in a flash sheet such as this, where we've kind of talked about all of the variables there, you know, that it's first of all, it's less work for the client. Actually, if we think about it like that, it's less work for them. They've been set up for success, right? With this, you could also call a flash sheet like a mini style guide, really, if we're talking about the true essence of a flash sheet in the sense of logos, not like the tattoos where there's like 100 different illustrations. It's almost your reference sheet, your golden reference sheet of all time. Just go back to it. You know, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you need. You go back to let me go back to Eric's flash sheet and like see where this use case makes sense.
Right. So I'm gonna try this strategy out on a couple of projects I've got going.
Yeah, well,
I think it'll work.
We check the full report.
I as a client, I would be thrilled if I ordered 1 and got 5. You know.
Yeah, in disguise. 4 in disguise.
Yeah, 4 in disguise.
4 in disguise. Yeah.
And the thing is, you've already done the work anyway.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, it's also like, so for me, I think flash sheets are fun because it just stretches your mind to wander just a little bit, but stay within the confounds of whatever you've made that main logo is. Right. You know what I mean? Like we've made that final thing that we know is going to be the main logo for whatever entity. But then you kind of get to have fun. And like you said, you're hedging towards like, hey, let's make sure the client uses the logo in the right way. But for us on that side, like it's kind of fun to be able to tweak it and show it in like 6 different iterations, knowing it's the same logo.
Right.
You know?
As far as a mini style guide, this one we're looking at now, it's actually a pretty strict style.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, there's not a lot of variation in terms of like there's 8 illustrations you could choose from, right, that are the same style or something. It's like you've got your colors are there, your type is there, You can use stars if you'd like to. And this is your type, you know, just use this type, you know. We could go down a rabbit hole of like, okay, yeah, Drew and Eric, but like what if, you know, Nike decides to rebrand? Well, we're not talking about like a global corporation that probably has a very lengthy style guide with, you know, secondary fonts and tertiary fonts and tertiary colors and all this stuff. But in this instance, like, it's very safe, and that's what a lot of clients need. They may not think they need it, but they need safe. Not safe as in like simple and lame, but safe as in like guided is
right.
a better word, right? Well, Eric, this has been awesome, man. I think people are gonna really like hearing your perspective, especially having a lot of experience in a bunch of different instances, and also being able to show us varying options, varying mediums with these flash sheets today is going to be very helpful, because it's not us just coming on here and saying like, here's 5 tips for making a flash sheet. Like, we're actually showing like, here's where the use case could be necessary for the flash sheet. But as we kind of come to a close here, are there any final thoughts or things that you want to mention that you think people should know about?
Branding, it's how it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
Used to be you never tampered with the brand. Never.
Yeah.
Pretty hard and fast rules. It's really changed now. I think we're in the age of customization,
yeah,
if you will, or you know, everybody carries the same phones, but they customize. We have football teams that change their uniforms every week. As a society, we're accustomed to it now. But it needs to have that cohesiveness. They need to belong together, and they need to be a family. But it needs to honor the brand above all.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to throw a bunch of curveballs, you know, around and say like, here's the main design, but like this secondary design, which looks nothing like the main design, is also our design.
It's okay to throw a quirky one in there every once in a while, a little oddball. It would be special occasions or something where they would use it, or
50th anniversary or something,
something like that, or a special T-shirt, or some kind of advertising novelty. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, I think clientele matters. You know, a boutique in downtown is flash sheet's going to look a lot different than a video game store.
Right.
You know, and yeah.
Honestly, I'm not sure how a large company would deal with flash sheets.
Yeah, it would, at the campaign level is probably what I would suspect.
Right.
Yeah, it would be very nuanced, right? Like they have such a big global icon, right? Think Nike or Adidas or whatever. Is that we have these campaign level.
Yeah, well, a Nike flash sheet would be 6 swooshes. They're not going to tamper with theirs too much.
No, yeah, it's complete. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for joining and talking through this. Everybody, again, his profile is linked down in the description. Don't forget to subscribe to Kittl. And if you're new here and just hung out with us and had some coffee and you have no idea what Kittl is, give it a try for free, signing up at the link in the description. And you can also click on one of these cards up here that you can see a full tutorial on what Kittl is, because we'd love for you to give it a try. And thank you so much for watching this video, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye, everyone.